Breaking free from family or societal expectations to follow your heart's desire and dreams can be challenging. It takes awareness, patience, and support to step out of the old patterns and move towards your own inner compass. My guest today, Bani Aello, listened and trusted her gut feeling and moved into a life of teaching and inspiring so many through the healing practices of yoga, meditation, and chanting. I'm excited to introduce you to her, so let's get started. Welcome to the Youthful Older Yogi podcast. I'm MJ Waddell, your yogi host and founder of Share Yoga. I've been practicing, teaching, and loving yoga for over 25 years. I'm an advocate of movement, creativity, and staying healthy in mind and body after 50. And so are my guests. It's never too late to start, and there's a lot of healthy years ahead. So let's start now. Hi, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Youthful Older Yogi. I'm MJ Waddell, creator and founder of Share Yoga and your host of the Youthful Older Yogi. Today, I have a wonderful guest. Her name is Bani Aello, and she's a certified yoga teacher with over 25 years experience in body work. She completed her teacher training in 2012. She has multiple certifications. She teaches weekly classes, Qigong, I think it is. And she helps people reduce their stress. She's taken John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness meditation course, a stress reduction course. Additionally, she's certified in Reiki, the second level of Reiki. And just for the past several years, she's really enjoyed teaching and facilitating meditations, workshops, personal growth sessions, retreats, and she's based in the Greater Rochester, New York area. And recently, she also started doing some sound healing and's got a nice little orchestra of singing bowls, which is fantastic. So I'd like to welcome Bani to the podcast. And Bani, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, MJ. Wonderful.
All right. Well, we're going to start right in. And I always ask my guests, how did, if you wouldn't mind telling the listeners how you found your way to yoga or how yoga found you?
Yeah. Well, I was in the gym and that was something that I would do. I went to the gym a lot. And when I was 40, I got divorced. And then I had a really hard time. I'd never actually lived alone. And then living alone, I had my kids part-time, but when they weren't there, it was like, I've got to be doing something and staying busy. So I was at the gym all the time. And then someone told me that yoga is actually really good for stress reduction. And that might be a good thing for me to try going through this divorce. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. So that's how I started.
I love it. Well, I've been through a divorce as well, and I call my Matt Dr. Matt because he absorbed all my tears and fears and stress and still does to this day. So I always roll out my mat and I say, "Hey, Dr. Matt, I'm here today. I got a lot to share with you." So, and before you found yoga, you were a school teacher, I think, for about 13 years.
Yeah.
And you loved working with the kids and the rewarding part of that, but there were other parts of the job, which in many jobs, the crap part of the job. And you were kind of having a tug of war about whether you should stay or leave or move on. And I'm just curious to know how you battled that internal tug of war and what finally won out.
Yeah, well, so when I started teaching yoga and meditation, it was giving me such stress relief. If someone would have asked me back then if I thought I was an anxious person or had anxiety, I probably would have said no. But that's only because I lived with it so long, I didn't actually know anything different. I was very much an anxious child, and then my whole life was an anxious person. But most of us, who really are that way, don't realize we are because we don't know anything different. But I started to experience a lot of peace and just feeling so much better in many ways in my life from yoga and meditation. And I wanted to share that with other people. So I just started to teach other people the things that I was learning because the teacher in me wanted to share it. And so I was doing that part-time. And I was getting a little bit like, wow, this is a little bit overwhelming because teaching school is a very demanding job. And then to teach some of this other stuff on nights and weekends, as much as I loved it, it was like, okay, it can be too much too. So I knew I needed to figure that out. And I knew at some point I wanted to go to do this kind of work full time, but I was like, wow, I've got to be the right time. I've got to save up a bunch of money, or I have to, like, I don't know what has to happen. Well, none of that happened. I didn't have any money saved, but I was actually in a meditation one day and I just felt this very strong calling that I was supposed to do this now. And it was like one of those things where I was like fighting with the voice saying, like, now. I'm like, no way. I'm not, I'm arguing in the meditation with, you know, the higher power, God, whoever it was, that was giving me this nudge to do it. And I'm like, there is no way I am not doing it. Just like talk to the hand kind of thing. So, but anyways, but it got to the point where I felt nauseous. I was pushing against the message so strongly.
Mm.
And, when I think about it, I had thought about it, it was like, yeah, I mean, I'm doing good things in that classroom, teaching kids reading and writing and math and all that, but teaching people tools to handle their stress.
Mm.
Because I mean, I saw kids could be the most brilliant kids in the world, but if they don't know how to manage their emotions and calm down from anxiety, like it's not really helping them. And then I saw that with adults too, like, brilliant, successful people, but somehow, things would be sabotaged. And I had friends of mine whose, kids were brilliant and going to these Ivy League schools and then just got so burnt out they had to drop out and quit and just couldn't even recover. So it's like if we don't have skills to manage our, whether it's anxieties or depressions or emotions, and learn to train our mind, like mindset training, like, so anyways, I felt that was so important, so that after that day, and I talked to my partner I was with, and he said he would support me in helping me with that transition.
Mhm.
So that's really why
Yeah.
I did it and how.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up sometimes during meditation, you do fight with your thoughts. People think it's just you sit there and you shut your mind off, and it's like that's pretty impossible, first of all. It's like almost impossible because your mind is always working to keep you alive, basically. And so I like it that you said, yes, I was in a meditation and there was this battle going on. And I think the reason I asked that question to you is because you really did listen to your intuition, which we all have. It's called that gut feeling, and you listen to it. And
Yeah.
regardless of how strong the other voice was, you went with your gut. And I think that's an important thing. And now, years later, that was a great choice. So
Yeah,
thank
and it's interesting because there were a lot of, like, I was afraid to tell my parents. Well, my felt like my mom, she was just like, "Well, whatever you want to do, Ben." But I felt like my dad would be like, "What are you talking about? You're like a single parent, and like that's crazy." And a lot of people thought I was crazy to leave a teaching job.
you.
Like when I didn't go all the way through and get all of my, um the money that I could get in retirement. And they just looked at me like I'm nuts. And like, to go to be a yoga teacher, are you kidding? You know what yoga teachers make out there? Like, how are you going to live on that? Right. So there was lots of naysaying and lots of that going on. But honestly, I think it was probably just 3 years from the time I stopped teaching, that I did this on my own, that I made as much money or more than I did when I was a school teacher. So, it's not really true that you can't make money as a yoga teacher.
Right. You have to hustle for it for sure, and you have to know what you're good at, but it's possible, and you're living proof of that. I wanted to pop in to thank you for listening to the Youthful Older Yogi. It's season 2, and I'm so excited to bring you more great guests, education, and ways for you to stay youthful in mind and body after 50. If you love the show and want to help me make it even better, please consider becoming a supporter. You get to choose how much and how often you give, and there's no commitment. And remember, I donate a portion of every dollar I receive to charity. For 2024, I've chosen UNICEF. Just click the support button in the show notes. And just as helpful is sharing the show with other youthful older yogis. Thank you again so much for listening. And now let's get back to the podcast. you had shared with me that you had some very traditional upbringings as far as faith goes, and I think this is for a lot of yoga teachers if they're brought up in some faith traditions, and then they move to teaching yoga, and some people have this idea that yoga is a religion, which it is not. And also specifically sometimes we are brought up in families as women, and there's a specific type of role that's expected or traditional. And could you share a bit more about that and your situation about that?
Mhm. Yeah. Um, well, yeah, I guess as far as, I mean, I have to admit, when I first got into yoga, it was more for the asana, and I think probably a lot of people start that way. And it was about like, oh, this is a great way to keep my body toned and, in shape as I move into my older years. And I didn't even really know about the other limbs until, into my teacher training. And then, like gradually I got more and more into the other limbs. Now I did teach meditation from an early part, but early on. So yeah, I guess the deeper I got into yoga as far as the other limbs of yoga, the more my family was concerned with the word yoga because in a very fundamentalist churches, they see that as something that's very bad. So there were times where I just wouldn't even like tell my family the whole thing. I mean, there's a funny story about like my mom calling me at one point because she knew I was into this kind of thing. And she's like, "Ban, I got to ask you, a friend of mine went to this woman who had a singing bowl. And I just told her that's crazy. Bowls can't sing. Never go back to her again." And meanwhile, I'm sitting there at my house and there's like singing bowls all over. But she had no idea of what a singing bowl was. So there's times where it's like, they live in Toronto, I'm in Rochester. I'm like, okay, I won't give them all the details of what I do. But yeah, I think that has been a hard thing because even as I would write blogs to my email list, and my parents are like reading they're on my email list, so like, which I wish they weren't to read everything I was saying. But I have gotten into the more of the spirituality of really yoking together with our true essence of who we are. Um, and that's a big important part for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yes, when you don't know about a certain subject or topic, and I think we do this generally as humans, we just assume there's this or so that's why I wanted you to share that. So
Yeah.
thank you. The singing bowl that just
Yeah.
reminds me like Mrs. Potts and Beauty and the Beast or something. She's a singing teapot. So and her little ship was a singing teacup.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so you also had shared with me, we always have a discussion before I bring guests on. You discussed with me how you're reflecting on your environment growing up, and there weren't many examples of women befriending women,
Yeah.
helping women, and you therefore consequentially built up some walls about that. And if
Mhm.
you wouldn't mind, I'd like you to unpack that a little bit. Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of women may be going through this or still feel this way.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it started pretty early on, like maybe where in I have to say my mom and my grandma kind of put the messages in my mind too about like, oh, they're just jealous of you. Like if I was having a conflict with another girl,
Mhm.
well, they're just jealous. They really didn't give me the skills of how to empathize or how to resolve or how to, see their point of view or anything like that. It was more, I mean, it was a very traditional Italian household. So they actually would say things like, you don't need friends, you only need your family. And like almost like they were all out there, and so not really good messages to encourage and to trust other women either. Like the messages was like, okay, you can't trust men because they only want one thing. Like that was all I was told. And then you can't trust women either because they'll stab you in the back. It was like, wow, there was a whole lot of not trusting messages going on in my childhood. Um, so that did make it so that I kind of was like really wary and didn't let people too close. And it has taken me time to break those walls down. And And really now, I mean, I just cannot imagine, like, I can't believe the beauty of like relationships with female friends, how powerful that is. And I just feel like there's years where I didn't have that, because another thing that I did, which this was messed up too, is that when I would, whether it was my husband or after my husband or before, like a boyfriend, it was like, I know I had a lot of insecurities growing up. I said I was anxious a lot. It was a quite a dysfunctional family I grew up in. So when I was with my boyfriend, husband, whoever, that was like that was all my life. And I'd like leave all my friends and, you know, abandon them and just focus on that male relationship, which, oh my gosh, you know, that was a mistake. But, I was a person who didn't have self-confidence, and I was looking for that from the person, the male I was with,
Mhm.
which,
Mhm. It's just, I believe it's human nature, Manny. It's not a mistake, it's just a lesson,
yeah.
I've been in many relationships where I gave and gave and gave, and it ended up not working. So,
Right.
then, not that you become selfish, but then you understand it's a give and take, whether it's
Yeah.
male or male to female or female to female. It's kind of that universal, like, here I am giving love and you want to receive the same. I just
Mhm.
think the golden rule for me. I mean, my mom was a religion teacher. We grew up very
Mhm.
Catholic, and
Oh.
I was so upset that I couldn't be an altar boy. It's like, I remember I'm like, why can't I be an altar boy? No, you can only be a nun. Like, so it's like, but I think it's there's lessons learned, and now you have a big group of friendship, and you lead women's retreats. That's like
Yeah.
amazing. So women only.
Yeah, and that does make me think of, though, one other thing, MJ, is how, even as adult women, it's like, say us as yoga teachers, like, how to not be competitive with each other. That's a really big goal of mine, to not see another yoga teacher as competition to me.
Mhm.
That to see it as like really trying to remove that word, there's no lack, and that collaboration, and that together, when we collaborate, how much better that is, and to support each other.
Mhm.
But that takes something down from our Western society of like, if we do it for our living and it's our livelihood, like competing, for business or whatever, like that's just something that I think if in the yoga world we can break that down, it would be so good.
Yeah, there's enough for everybody. There's enough people, and you figure out what limb of yoga, or what, how you niche down or whatever. And I think you had mentioned that you just kind of go whatever you feel with at the moment. Like, you kind
Mhm.
of haven't stuck to one thing. You're like, oh, I'm feeling this now, so I'm going to give this a go. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of like whatever kind of wave comes in. Just for instance, this summer, there's a couple, like school districts they're doing their wellness thing for their teachers in the summer, and they're like, "Oh, could you do a program with us, or could you do, some wellness day?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's good." And then that kind of moves away, and then something else will wave in, and yeah, it moves around.
Going with the flow. That's perfect. So,
Yeah,
um, and let's see, you started yoga at 40. I started mine at 36. I started taking yoga.
yeah,
And previous to that, you called yourself a gym rat. Same,
yep,
same with me. I was always in the gym, making sure I could fit into my costume and all that stuff, and making sure I was
yeah,
this big. Um, and you were really drawn to the power yoga and the asana. Me too. Exactly the same thing. It was more of an ego-driven practice because I had
mhm,
been using my body as a dancer and performer and all of that. So, and then you went to teacher training, which happens to
mhm,
many of us,
mhm,
myself included, and you had to do some unlearning. Can you talk about
yeah.
that a little bit?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, for starters, I was doing so many of my poses incorrectly because I just had jumped into a power vinyasa flow, where there's not a lot of instruction on the poses. You're just cued to flow, and doing poses incorrectly. I had a sore lower back. I had something with my knee, but I was like, I kind of have a body that's more strong. So I was like, muscling myself into these poses, but didn't sometimes have the flexibility that I was in them in the right alignment. So it
Mhm.
was kind of a mess. And then my yoga instructor would kind of let me know, like, you got to start from scratch and learn everything from the beginning, and really, humbled me down there. And I mean, I can remember him saying, okay, this week we're going to do restorative yoga. And I was like, oh my God, what a waste of my time. I could lay and have a nap at home. Why? Oh, I'm like, so then I'd never been in a restorative yoga class. So he does the restorative yoga, and I could not believe how much I needed it. Like, I don't know. It's like, I guess it's that thing, you don't need it. You don't know you need it until you maybe experience it. And I just had the most amazing relaxation that came over me in the restorative class, that it's like, wow, how was I was so much tighter and uptight, and I didn't even know it. So that there was so many different kinds of learning through that.
Same with me. I think I took my first restorative class with in Rochester with Lisa Ferrix, who's a restorative teacher. She also does sound healing. And
Mhm.
and I felt the same way, Bani. I'm like, oh, but I do shavasana, good enough, right? But it's like
Mhm.
at that point I was type A. Now I'm like, I call myself, I'm like a B minus. I'm not a type A anymore. I'm like, I'm a B minus type. It's good. Restorative, yes. Let me lay down, right? So
Yeah.
and then I started teaching it because they asked
Mhm.
me at the studio to teach it. And I'm like, and that's when, yes, and most people they don't that are type A and into the power, they feel like they're wasting their time when really they're doing their nervous system the best gift ever is
Mhm.
in restorative. And if you're listening out there and you've never been to a restorative class, it's not a yin class, it's a restorative class. You lay down, you're supported, and you breathe and you let go, and it's it's just delicious.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that word, right? Yes, perfect.
It's delicious, yeah. um, okay, and then today, let's talk about today. So today you're leading retreats, you're teaching meditation, you're teaching yoga. You started leading some chanting, and I think you told me you bought a harmonium, and
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
teaching yourself how to play it. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. And so what can you tell us about the power of chanting? And can
Mhm.
you just break it down for people why it's important to chant, and what how sound can help us?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting. I don't know if this happened to you, MJ, but it's like as soon as I got into like one part of this area of healing, like yoga, and then it would open a door to another one, a door to another one. Like, so yeah, so sound healing is it's kind of a big thing right now. A lot of people are into it and doing it and stuff. And like, how does it work? Well, it's really, I mean, not necessarily that the sounds heal us, but the sounds put our nervous system into a healing state. So they induce the relaxation response, which is what some yoga does, which is what pranayama does, which what meditation does. So the relaxation response gets induced where the heart rate lowers, breathing rate, blood pressure, all the hormones of stress stop being released, the healing chemicals begin to be released, and there's certain sounds that can induce that um, more quickly. And those are a lot of the sounds that we use in sound baths, like crystal singing bowls or gongs or chimes and all that kind of thing.
Mhm, mhm,
And then I got into the chanting. And so I guess I feel like now I really feel strongly that using our voice is the most powerful sound healing tool we have. And I think, like, our culture, it's very, very unfortunate that in our Western culture, people who have a good voice or like they can sing, they're the ones that do it, and it's performance based, like for a crowd. And then other people, like, all it takes for, like, I remember someone saying something about my voice when I was a kid, it not sounding good, like just like a wisecrack, like funny thing. And I stopped singing from that point on. I mean, when we went to church and I would just mouth the words, and never let my voice be heard. My sister, she was the singer. she was in all the, leads in the musicals and in bands and stuff like that. And I was like, there's no way I'm singing. Then the story comes, I don't sing, I can't sing. I mean, it's a horrible, I honestly feel it's a curse that we put on ourselves to that extent. Native Americans say, um, we as Western people began to get sick when we stopped singing, and stopped dancing and stopped drumming. But, you know, um, it's just a crime that we've done to ourselves if we don't let ourselves sing, because we have a story that our voice isn't good enough or something. So it was, when I would go to some chanting things. Well, first of all, I thought chanting was super weird, and I would go up to Omega for weekend retreats in the summers, and I would take one of the classes, and I would do some other cool stuff on the side. But I'm like, if they do that chanting thing Saturday nights, I'm never going to do that. Like, I'll try a lot of stuff, but I'm never going to be that weird. And so then one day I'm like, okay, I just got to peek in, and I'm like standing at the door, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're just really singing. And actually, the vibe in here is like incredible. And then I go step inside. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening? It was like this beautiful energy through my body and around me that's like, this is heavenly. So I had some experiences like that. But truthfully, sometimes I was with a partner, or I knew my family certainly wouldn't approve of chanting. Um, and that, so I kind of played it down. I didn't really pursue it. And then my mom passed away. It'll be about 8 months ago now. And I'm like, gosh darn it. My mom was one that she followed what she wanted to do, right? And she did some pretty wacky stuff, but she loved it. And I'm like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and that's chanting. And I don't care who likes it and who doesn't like it. It's healing for me. So I bought a harmonium, no idea how to ever play, never played on a keyboard before, but friends helped me. YouTube's amazing, and I've been learning all these chants and leading chanting sessions. And so every morning I get up and I come in my meditation room and I practice chanting with my harmonium. And so I guess what I feel like, it's a wonderful thing, because if someone has a hard time meditating, just sitting still and being quiet, this is a perfect way to meditate or to go into meditation, like a segue. Just like, we see our asana practice as a way to kind of wear the body out so we can lay in shavasana and receive more. Well, chanting is similar. Like, if we do a bunch of singing first and then we can have some stillness for meditation. And there's something about Sanskrit words. I mean, they're like little bowls of energy that people have said and chanted in a devotional prayer-like state for thousands of years, that contain all that energy of all the people who've ever chanted them. So when you do it, it's like there is just this beautiful energy that washes over and through a person, and myself, and it's just like the most incredibly healing thing. I'm just so all about it. It's my jam totally right
Love
now.
it. I love your passion about it. And yeah, those seed sounds, those little seed sounds that they put together when you chant, you might not know what they mean, but they are vibrational in different parts of the body for sure. And
Yeah.
I've been on stage, most of my life as a performer and a singer. And
Right.
we had this conversation. I always backed away from doing any type of chanting because I have been, a professional singer and dancer, and I take voice lessons twice a month, and that's like my and we do lots of exercises, and even the exercises, it's like it's so. And I'm single, I live alone, so sometimes I don't talk to a soul all day. Like, so, but I'll sing. I'll get in the car and I'll sing around here because it's and I think as children, if you watch children, they have no fear about singing and dancing. It's like
Yeah.
it is part of our humanness, our divineness. That, and then somebody says something derogatory, and it just fucks you up. It's like
Yeah.
it messes
Yeah.
you up, and you're right. It's a crime. It's a crime. Everybody
Yeah.
has a voice, and everybody chants when they go to a football game, or they have
Yeah.
a chant here, or they do call and response at church, or
Hmm.
everybody has chanted. There's no
Yeah.
one that hasn't done one chant, at a football game or a basketball game, or
Hmm.
some, they have a little, your work group might, 1, 2, 3, go, your teams, all
Right.
of that. So
On the school bus coming home from school.
yes, so everyone is chanted. So I'm love that you're passionate about it. And tell me, what do you find the most rewarding in your career or your practice right now?
Oh, I just feel like the luckiest person in the world when I'm teaching my yoga classes and my meditation because I see people come in off the streets. It's like coming in out of a war zone sometimes. And it's like, and then they're in there on their mat, like, oh my God, I'm finally here, and the ambiance is nice. And then I feel like I can see them by the end and by the time they leave, just having a greater sense of peace on their face that they've let go of some of the heaviness that they were carrying. And just so grateful, so rewarding to see that. And that it's like for some people, it's their lifeline to go into that yoga studio and then they can go back home and then deal with all the stuff that they have to face there.
Good. Yeah. And tell our listeners you have a retreat coming up, I think, in October. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah. I do them every spring and fall. And this one is the October 4th weekend. And it's at Light on the Hill Retreat Center. It's a beautiful little retreat center up in Van Etten, New York, which is near Watkins Glen. So it's just like an hour and a half from Rochester, which is not too bad. So we start on a Friday afternoon and we do have some type of forced immersion before dinner. And then we do circle work. So circle work, there's large circle, the whole group, and then there's small circle groups of 3 or 4 people that will break up into throughout the week. But just again, women coming together and being able to have this safe space to share authentically and use their own voice and express their feelings and thoughts about a certain topic and held in a container where they're not going to be judged and they're going to be seen and going to be heard. Oh my gosh. And people get so close and make the best friends. So we do yoga every morning and we do other activities too. There's always an art experience that's related to the theme. And so they're just lovely times to get away and retreat, like get away from everything to fill your cup up again and restore yourself.
And that we will have the link and how
Okay.
to find that retreat. So it'll be in
Okay.
the show notes, everybody. And so I always ask my guests, what are your thoughts on aging as you lean into your older years? Have you noticed anything, not just physical, because that comes without saying, but have you
Mhm.
noticed anything mentally or spiritually or some aspect of moving into your later years that is surprising to you or unexpected?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. That's another thing I kind of did see the women in my life growing up that always talked about, um, how much they didn't like the aging process. And so those messages are in there. But, doing some work on the archetypes bring the crone archetype. Now, crone doesn't sound like a nice word, but when you dig into what the crone archetype it is, it's the wise woman. So people might have even called her like, the witch that people go to for the medicine, that the healing medicine. But I think if we as women can come into our crone energy, and if you don't like the word crone energy, maybe you can kind of, I've kind of worked into feeling okay with it, but it's or even wise energy. Like if you think about if women realized how much wisdom they have by the time they get to 50, 60, 70, whatever it is, like, oh my gosh, it's incredible. And that how we can be mentors to, younger women. And we do hold a lot of wisdom. And so I feel really good about really knowing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. I mean, this is a big reason I'm doing the podcast
Mm,
to bring older. I mean, I've had younger yogis on. I'm not, there's no, everyone's welcome, but it's, there's seasons of our lives, our
yeah.
20s, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, 60s, they're 70s, they're all different and they're all lovely, in their own container, and then
Mhm.
just pile them on top of each other. And first of all, you get to wake up every day and take another breath, which is
Mm,
hello, that's the best gift ever. And in this, that what we share, well-being and yoga, and it's to stay youthful and actually just move into aging with intelligence. It's like intelligent aging instead of thinking, oh, I'm not, I'm old now. I can't do this. I can't do that. Actually, I think it's a whole different opening where there's just so much you can do. You might have trouble trying to figure out what to do, but I think it's
Mhm.
a beautiful part of life. And
Yeah, and just one other thought as you're talking about that is, because all of your saying is making me think of this word is that like so important that we maintain a sense of dignity as we age. And I teach a chair yoga class, and they're all in their 70s and 80s, and it can be hard for some of them. I can see to maintain that dignity when they feel the body can't do things and it's in a shape that they wish it was in, and they might have to do some things that they might consider undignified as far as even their own self-care or wearing depends or whatever it is. But I could talk to them all the time about maintain your dignity for who you are, the wise being that you are, that we're not these bodies. We are this divine beautiful essence, and the wisdom that they contain. I just feel so honored to be in front of every single one of them.
mhm,
Like every wrinkle on their hand or their face, like holds so much wisdom, and to just, yeah, to have that dignity and grace. And
yeah.
that's what I hope for myself, that I'm able to
Good, and you have a
continue.
birthday coming up this year. We had
Yeah.
a conversation before, and you thought you were 1 year younger than you actually are, but it's
Yeah.
if you won't mind sharing, what's
Yeah.
the ex
No, that's true. It was so funny because I'm thinking I'm gonna turn 59 on my next birthday. And my sister, I'm talking to her and she's like, "Man, I think you better check your birth certificate because I think you got a big one coming up." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm born in 64. It's 2024." And I like screamed on the phone with her and I freaked out for a little while just because, just like that number 5 when I started my 50s, it was a little hard to get used to. So then the 6 number, it's like, wow, I gotta wrap my head around this. So yes, I am going to be 60 in December. And yes, I got to go in with dignity and grace and feel my wisdom.
I know you will. And, what currently is your favorite yoga pose? If you can narrow it down to one, what's your current favorite yoga
Oh, man. Yeah, it's taken me a long time to love downward dog.
pose?
Like, I definitely did not love it for the first decade or so, but I do love that. And I don't want to be too cliche and say shavasana, but because I really do love shavasana too.
Those of
So
you
those,
listening, yeah, that don't know what shavasana, well, downward facing dog is that upside down V, which you see people in most. That's what most people associate yoga with, that downward facing dog pose. And shavasana is at the end of the practice, or it doesn't have to be. It can be at any point, but you just lay down and you do nothing, and it looks like that's yoga. They're not doing anything, and I can tell you, and I know Bani agrees with me. There's so much going on during that
the
shavasana
hardest pose of all.
artist pose. It's called corpse pose. It's like you die. It's like
Mm.
it's a death. It symbolizes a death, and then you're reborn. But thank you for sharing. Yeah, I love both of those poses too. And then this is a question I didn't give to you prior, but I ask this of all my guests. Usually, and it's a final question. Usually, the question is framed, knowing all you know now and everything you've learned through your life experience, what would you like to tell your younger self? But I like to rephrase the question and say, knowing all that you know now and all of the life experience that you have or have had, what do you want to tell your future self? What advice
Oh,
or thought
mm,
would you tell your future self?
yeah. Wow. I mean, the first thing that came to mind is just I'm proud of you, because I know how hard I've tried like my whole life and how my intentions have always been good. Um, and and I am proud of myself for getting through some obstacles that were not so much outside, but all in here, obstacles inside. Of lower self-esteem and not thinking I'm good enough. I mean, those obstacles, they are not easy to get over and get through and to keep on stepping forward. Um, so yeah, I'm proud of myself for pushing through, even when there was doubts and fears and staying the course.
Yeah, it's well, it's human. There's nobody leaves this life without challenge, and
Mhm,
really some really hard ones. And you think you're never going to get through them.
mhm,
You you go through them. You get through them, and hopefully you learn from them. And but they're just hell when you're in them. I know it's
mhm,
sometimes.
mhm.
So I'm proud of you too. It's uh, and we should be proud of ourselves for
Mhm.
just being in this human body and all that brings to it. So okay, well, Bani, I am so grateful that you've been on the podcast. Again, everybody will have her links where you can find her and where you can find the retreat. um, and I just am so grateful that we've reconnected,
Yeah, me too.
what you're doing, and thank you so much for being on the Youthful Older Yogi.
Yeah, thank you for doing this, MJ. I think it's fabulous.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening. For more youthful and healthy information, subscribe on my website, shareyogawithmj.offeringtree.com, and receive my monthly newsletters. Or if you know how to navigate social media, find me on Facebook /Mary Jane Waddell. That's Jane with a Y, Jayne, and Instagram at Mary Jane Waddell. Remember, Jane with a Y. This podcast would not be possible without the help of my editor, Dan Jones from Cocoa Beach Productions. You can find Dan at cocoabeachweb.com. And of course, thanks to my generous guests who share their time and youthful wisdom. Remember, the Youthful Older Yogi podcast is presented solely for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for a physician or other qualified professionals. Okay, yogis, stay well, stay youthful, and keep sharing yoga.